And with that, Graham Honaker serves as an executive director of principal gifts at Butler University, where he is entering his 12th year. He has an undergraduate degree from Wake Forest University and a master's degree from Indiana University. He previously co-authored two books, The Cinderella Strategy and Unbracketed, and has a new book, along with Dr. Alex Kaur, coming out in May entitled A Blessing, Not a Burden, My Parents' Remarkable Holocaust Story, and My Fight to Keep Their Legacy Alive. He has been a Toastmaster for 22 years and won the District 11 Humorous Speech Contest 3 times in 2008, 2013, and 2022. He is married to Dr. Sana Honaker, and they have two daughters, Kate and Bella. So please welcome our specialist for tonight, Graham Honaker.
Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me okay? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, well, I really appreciate being with you tonight. Sorry if it's a little dim. My background, I am traveling. I have a family member who's dealing with an illness here, so I'm on the road in a hotel room, but I appreciate the time to be with you. I think Marjane found me via an article that I wrote, I guess it's now 6 or 7 years ago, in Toastmasters International magazine, called My 6 Rules of Humor. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about those 6 rules. I'm going to try to save a couple minutes, a minute or two for questions. You can put them in the chat if you would like. So feel free. But I real briefly, I want to, and I guess I'm giving Toastmasters International a lot of credit here. I always say this before I give any speech. Toastmasters has been invaluable for me. In my early 20s, I couldn't stand up and say my name in front of a group of 10 people. And I decided at an early age, I've aged a little bit since then, at an early age that I wanted to beat my fear of public speaking. And I've now been a Toastmaster for 22 years, and I've grown invaluably. So I am indebted to the Toastmasters program for overcoming shyness, timidness, all of those things. I'll start out with a joke. Hopefully I can tell a joke or two that might make you laugh. I always like this one from Jerry Seinfeld, who once said, he cited the study that we're more afraid of public speaking than we are of dying. Hence, at funerals, we'd rather be the ones in the coffins than the one giving the eulogy. I always think about that quote, but Toastmasters has kind of helped me overcome that. I really believe, and if there's one thing that I'd like to leave you with tonight, is humor can amplify just about any speech. If done right, humor can amplify just about any speech. It takes a lot of time. It takes workmanship and practicing your craft. I'd be lying if I think some of us are maybe born with a little bit more of a funny bone than others, but if you can work at it and add humor, it can amplify almost any speech, even in eulogies. I still, when I give a eulogy, I try to slide something funny in there to pay tribute to that individual and to maybe lighten up the mood a little bit. Real briefly, I have been fortunate enough to win 3 competitions, District 11 competitions in 2008, 2013, and the last one was last year, 2022 or 2020. Yeah. And I picked some topics that I thought I'd share with you because they're rather random. But to give you an example of how I think humor can fit into just about any scenario, the first one is probably the most bizarre that only a Toastmasters audience can appreciate. But my first championship speech was comparing the birth of my first child to a Toastmasters meeting. And you say, how on earth does that work? And I went through the analogy of a meeting to that birth. For example, I had the timer light in the delivery room. You know, when she's ready to go, we're at red, folks. The word of the day, I had a big sign that said the word of the day, epidural. At the end of the delivery, I gave her an evaluation. You did great. You hung in there. Your vocal variety was awesome. You were screaming the whole time. Just watch your ahs, your ums, those things in the delivery. She didn't like that much, but the whole speech, somebody's laughing, I think. the whole speech was that kind of radical concept of comparing a Toastmasters meeting to the birth of my child. Luckily, I'm still married. I don't think my wife cared for the speech, but fortunately, the district judges did. Uh, in 2013, now by this time, I had two small children, and I had found really that nothing was more hellacious than traveling with small children. And my speech was about how you should never travel with small children. And I talked about some of my travails. My wife has a lot of family in Europe, so we were having to go over there with a 1 and 3 year old. And I was trying to get the emergency exit door off the plane every time to jump because of how miserable it was. But I would, and I'll talk about this in a minute. I used props, and I used, you're better off shipping your kid in a FedEx box. And I brought the FedEx box up there. So that was my second one. My third one, you can see this has a theme. These are all family related. My third one was about going on a Disney cruise. I don't know if anybody is, cruises are great, but Disney cruises, if you're not a billionaire, they're not a lot of fun because they're the most expensive things on earth. There's a reason they call it the Magic Kingdom, folks, because your money disappears just like that, anything Disney related. But I talked about this Disney cruise and how it was the most god awful thing on the face of the earth, and that one won as well. So I've had a lot of fun with those competitions. The other thing I would say about contests, for those of you who compete, is you really grow as a speaker when you compete. Your butterflies are a little more, they're fluttering a little more. So I encourage any of you, if you haven't tried a speech contest, to do it, but particularly a humorous speech contest. I may be biased, but it can be a bit daunting as you move up the levels to try to make an audience laugh that becomes bigger and bigger as you grow on that stage. So I'm going to quickly go through my 6 rules. Hopefully Marjane has shared the article. If not, we can share that with you. Number 1 is find humor in everyday life. A lot of questions I've got over the years are, I can't think of anything funny. And a lot of the great stand-up comics would tell you they get a lot of their humor by just being a good observer of life. My speeches, I definitely exaggerated them, but they were based on things that I had seen, especially the last 2, when I traveling with my kids and just wanting to jump out of the airplane and then starting to think about this could be a really, really funny speech. On the Disney cruise, the big theme of that was the financials of it, how much it cost. For example, and again, I'm a big user in props. I talked about how at the end I got the receipt for the bill on the Disney cruise. And what I did, those CVS receipts you get, they basically have killed a whole tree. I taped about 4 of those together and I brought it out of my pocket. I said, this was the bill from the cruise. But I got that from observing really how much money it had cost me on that. Other jokes I'll use in my club. Think about, I'm going to ask, can I ask for participation on this call?
Always.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question. When you see husband or wife, girlfriend or boyfriend going out to dinner these days, what do you find different when they're sitting at the table that you might not have seen 25 years ago?
They text each other.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I used that joke actually on my on the Disney cruise speech. I said, these cruises are great, because they have teen clubs and kids clubs. Your kids can go, I'll go to it. But the problem is you actually have to sit with your spouse. Oh, actually, sorry, I prefaced it. Internet doesn't work on the cruises. I said, the problem with these cruises, you actually have to sit with your spouse and talk with them. You can't use your phones. So that's a joke, right? That came from not like off the top of my head, but observation. So rule number 1, find humor in everyday life. Write it down. Know your audience. This is a big one, right? That first speech comparing Toastmasters meeting to the birth of my child never would work, right? Outside of any other audience, outside of Toastmasters. Know who you're talking to. Know where the humor is going to land. Humor in what audience? And I'm not even talking about politically incorrect humor. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Know who you're talking to. Like I'm a big sports fan, and sometimes I'll use an analogy around sports or something. And I remember this group I'm talking to could care less about sports, right? So know who you're talking to when you're thinking about the type of humor that you're going to use. This is a big one. This is a big one that we've seen it so much, folks, in the last 30 or 40 years of somebody losing a job, a career, anything over a bad joke or a joke that offends, correct? And I coach a few of our speakers when they go into humorous contests, and we always talk very firmly about if there's a joke you think that's even going to slightly get to the line of offending, do not use it. And that's hard, right? Because our society, I think now, so much of humor is dirty humor, dirty jokes. And how do you tell a clean joke that's really funny, that hits with your audience, that doesn't offend? It's very hard. I would say the biggest rule I use is self-deprecating humor. It's been very successful for me because it doesn't offend anyone. I'm a very pale, redheaded guy, so I've used that a lot. One of my humorous speeches that didn't win was about the challenges of being a redhead, and I talked about going to the beach, and again, thinking about props, right? I brought out a suntan lotion bottle, and I had a sign made up over it that said SPF 2000, right? Making fun of myself that I've never had a tan in my life, that I thought my name was Opie Taylor growing up. I had an identity complex. So if you're trying to hit the mark and you're worried about offending, self-deprecating humor is really good. And you have to be able to laugh at yourself to do that. But always consult with someone. I will give an example from that speech on traveling with my kids that was probably the hardest decision I had about using a joke or not using one. I had a line in there about traveling with my kids when we were on planes, and it was a nightmare. And the joke I used was, it's really bad that all you get now on planes you don't get meals anymore. All you get are pretzels and peanuts, small bags. And then I transitioned into saying, the one good thing, if you have young kids or acting up, pause. You know what the biggest choking hazards are for young kids? Pretzels or peanuts. Now, I ran that. I had somebody tell me that, that might offend somebody. And I kept it in because I felt it was so ridiculous, right? That for me, it worked. But you really have to be thoughtful about consulting with someone. We'll wrap up here with a couple other lessons. How am I doing on time?
Little under 12.
Okay. Okay. We'll finish up on time. Don't step on your laughter. I talk to our club all the time about this, especially our new members, is they will tell a joke and it'll hit. The audience is laughing and then they'll go right into what they're going to say next. If you're saying something funny and it hits, pause and let the audience sit on it. I will say, I don't know how you guys are with hybrid versus in-person contests. I'm a much bigger fan of in-person. A humorous speech is very hard to do when everybody's muted and you can't hear the laughter. And the last competition I competed in was online, and it was very hard, but it's so important. If you have a joke that works, pause, let it soak in, let the audience laugh. And then the final thing I would say, final lesson for speech contest, it sounds really simplistic. They need to be funny. I see a lot of contests that become more of a tall tales than a humorous speech contest, or the speech starts out with 2 or 3 minutes before the first joke lands. You really need to have humor in there to advance up the levels. But finally, the biggest thing I would say is you need to laugh and have fun. When you're up there, smile, laugh. Again, that self-deprecating humor, if you can laugh at yourself, it makes it more enjoyable. And, obviously go to speech competitions, watch, you can see great speakers on YouTube. Study the comedians. Comedians You can see so much good material from stand-ups that not only can transition or translate into your humorous speech contest, but can translate into any speech in general with body language, eye contact, vocal variety. So again, study the great comedians when you're thinking about humorous speeches. Having said that, maybe we have a minute or two for time, but those are my 6 rules. Again, most important thing for me, really good humor that hits home with your audience can amplify any speech. It's been an honor speaking with you today.
Thank you, Graham.